Imagine your kitchen. It is winter. It's gray and cold outside. Inside, your mother lifts the lid off the cooking pot. A small yellow cube dissolves in the hot water. Maggi. The scent spreads. Warm, salty, familiar. For millions of families, this is the smell of security. And therein lies the danger. But what if this very feeling of security is just a perfect illusion created to make us dependent? Maggi is not just a product, it's a piece of childhood, a symbol of home. The seasoning in the soup, the quick noodles after school, the bottle of Maggi on the table. Generation after generation has learned, with Maggi it tastes just like at grandma's. But this is exactly where the story we're telling today begins. Because behind this warm nostalgia lies a system that has little to do with real food. A system that turned simple ingredients into an industry and trust into dependence. We've all seen it before. The commercials, the smiling families, the colorful packaging meant to create a sense of closeness and naturalness. But the truth looks different. For decades, Maggi has burned itself into our lives as a solid brand. But behind this seemingly harmless success story, another reality awaits. One that led to scandals, health crises, and criticism from scientists, politicians, and activists. The answer takes us back to the beginning, the invention and the rise. The story of Maggi begins in the 19th century, in a time full of poverty, hunger, and hard factory work. Europe was in the midst of industrialization. Factories rattled, chimneys smoked, people toiled 12 to 14 hours a day, and there was often hardly any time or money left for fresh, nutritious meals. In this world, one man stepped onto the scene, Julius Maggi. Born in 1846 in Frauenfeld, Switzerland, the son of an Italian immigrant. Julius saw early on how working-class families suffered. Cheap bread, watery soups, hardly any vitamins, hardly any protein. Illnesses were the result. His goal to find a solution for the poor. He wanted to create a product that was affordable, quick, and still nutritious. His first attempt was flour products made from legumes, but they flopped. Hardly anyone wanted to eat them, but Julius didn't give up. He kept experimenting, and in 1886, the time had come. Maggi seasoning hit the market. A brown liquid, dark, intense, salty, cheap to produce, easy to transport, and full of umami flavor. Long before that word was even known, the success was enormous. Maggi promised hearty meals for little money. Suddenly, every housewife, whether in Zurich, Vienna, or Berlin, could make any simple meal especially tasty with just a few drops. A few years later came the next big success, the bouillon cube. Small, compact, practical, and thus perfect for the new, fast-paced world. Maggi became not just a product, but a symbol of modernity. But even here, the downside becomes apparent. What was originally intended as an aid for poor working-class families quickly developed into an industrial product full of salt, flavorings, and additives. The original vision of healthy nutrition turned into a strategy focused on mass production, shelf life, and profit. At the same time, Maggi began to expand internationally. In 1897, the first German factory opened in Singen am Hohentwiel, which remains one of the most important production sites to this day. From there, Maggi conquered kitchens all over the world. Within just a few decades, Julius Maggi's vision had become an empire. But with every drop from the bottle, with every cube in the pot, we moved a little further away from real food. But what happens when food no longer comes from the kitchen, but from the factory? Chemistry instead of cooking. A cube small, inconspicuous, wrapped in yellow. But what happens when you unwrap it, crumble it, and take a closer look? Anyone who thinks Maggi is simply a seasoning will be disappointed. Because at its core, the famous bouillon cube doesn't consist of fresh vegetables, meat, or herbs, but of industrial chemicals. The base, a lot of salt, so much that a single cube often already covers more than a third of the recommended daily intake. This product mainly delivers high blood pressure, increased risk of cardiovascular diseases, and obesity. But salt is just the beginning. Added to that is palm oil, cheap, long-lasting, but ecologically devastating. Rainforests are disappearing, orangutans are losing their habitats, while Maggi cubes end up in millions of kitchens. And that's not all. The flavors and flavor enhancers, yeast extract, monosodium glutamate, artificial roasted flavors, sugar in various forms. All of this ensures that our brain receives flavor signals reminiscent of real, slow-cooked broth, even though not a single bone or vegetable ever touched the pot. But the most dangerous trick isn't in the ingredients, but in the effect it has on our brain. Maggi doesn't sell food, but a simulation of food. Imagine your child growing up with this simulation and never knowing the real taste of vegetables or meat. The soup packets contain stabilizers, thickeners, and colorants. And the famous Maggi seasoning, a fermented soy product that's given an extra kick with salt and additives. But the ingenious and at the same time dangerous thing is, this combination is addictive. Not in the classic sense like a drug, but our brain becomes conditioned to it. We keep wanting more of it. Nutritionists have been warning for decades. Those who grow up with such products from an early age lose their sense of real taste. Children don't learn what carrots, celery, or beef actually taste like. They learn what Maggi tastes like. An artificial standard that becomes ingrained in people's minds. Marketing and manipulation. When products can't convince on their own, advertising takes over. And this is exactly where Maggi perfected an art that still works today. The manipulation through images, language, and emotions. The company understood early on, taste alone doesn't sell. Stories do. That's why posters and ads spoke of strength for the whole family. Quick meals made from grandma's recipes and love that goes through the stomach. The target group was clear: mothers, women who stood at the stove, who bore the responsibility for the family's well-being. Maggi promised them not only to save time, but also recognition. If it tastes like Maggi, you're a good mother. In the 1950s and 1960s, these messages became even more intense. Commercials showed happy children spooning soup, men sitting contentedly at the table, and women who, with a small cube, seemed to achieve the impossible. Maggi also made its way into schools and households. Maggi didn't just sneak into our pots, but into our minds as well. Recipe booklets, cookbooks, brochures, often distributed for free, showed how easy and modern cooking with Maggi could be. Later came sponsorship deals, product placements in cooking shows, and promotional gifts. And the children, they too, were specifically targeted. Colorful packaging, funny characters, simple recipes. Maggi appealed to entire generations, even before they understood what they were eating. When the company was finally swallowed up by one of the most powerful corporations in the world, this manipulation took on an entirely new dimension. Global expansion and Nestlé. Maggi had long been a successful product, but the decisive step toward becoming a global power happened in 1947. The brand became part of Nestlé, now the largest food corporation in the world. From that point on, everything changed. Maggi was no longer run by a single man, but by a corporation bigger and more powerful than some governments. A brand rich in tradition with Swiss roots became a global instrument, controlled by a company known for expansion, control, and ruthless market dominance. Nestlé already had a worldwide distribution network: powdered milk, chocolate, coffee. With Maggi, the corporation now had a product that could be perfectly adapted to any culture. In Africa, chicken-flavored cubes. In India, spicy instant noodles. In Latin America, special seasoning sauces. In Europe, the classic good old soup. Maggi became a global brand and at the same time, one of the most profitable products in Nestlé's portfolio. Today, Maggi products are available in more than 100 countries, in countless variations, often specifically tailored to local preferences. But expansion comes at a price. In many countries, Maggi is deliberately marketed as a solution to poverty. A cube costs little, adds flavor, and makes people dependent. Critics speak of culinary colonization. Real cooking culture is being displaced, local recipes are disappearing, and what remains is a globally standardized taste. In its brand communication, Nestlé often associates Maggi with positive themes: enjoyment, easier cooking, and a form of nutritional aid. On the official website, for example, it says that for centuries, Maggi has aimed to help prepare tasty and nutritious meals. But the criticism is that behind these images lie primarily economic interests. The strategy is always the same: market dominance through aggressive advertising, pushing out smaller local providers. Creating loyalty by making products so cheap and ubiquitous that they seem indispensable. This becomes especially visible in emerging markets. In India and Nigeria, for example, Maggi has long been part of the food culture, not because it is traditional, but because Nestlé has managed to tie entire generations to its bouillon cubes and noodles. But wherever a global corporation appears, scandals follow. And in the case of Maggi, some of them were so massive that they made headlines around the world. 2015 in India, Maggi noodles were among the best-selling instant noodles and were a part of everyday life in many households. Then a food scandal sounded the alarm. Several tests found lead levels in samples that were significantly above the permitted limit. Lead, a heavy metal that primarily damages the nervous system of children, even the smallest amounts can cause concentration problems, developmental disorders, and permanent damage. Authorities also discovered traces of MSG in products labeled "No Added MSG." The result: India imposed a nationwide sales ban. Millions of packets were thrown out of supermarkets and burned. Images of containers full of Maggi noodles went around the world. Imagine giving your child these noodles and later finding out they contained lead. Nestlé denied everything, claiming measurement errors and local outliers. But the scandal was there and the trust was destroyed. This was just the most well-known case because Maggi repeatedly made headlines and each one showed how deep the problem really runs. Salt shock in Europe. Consumer protection agencies criticized the high salt content of many Maggi products. This was especially apparent with children's soups. They were advertised as mildly salted. In reality, they were anything but low in salt. Palm oil debate. Nestlé uses palm oil in many of its supply chains, including for seasonings and convenience products like Maggi. Environmental organizations warn that some of this palm oil comes from regions where rainforests have been cleared. Despite public promises for traceable and sustainable supply chains, there is evidence that palm oil from problematic sources is still being used. Overweight and obesity. Instant noodles contain a lot of salt, fat, and empty calories. Studies show that frequent consumption increases the risk of high blood pressure and metabolic disorders, especially in countries like India or Nigeria, where such products are widespread. Especially insidious, Maggi products are often specifically marketed to families. Colorful packaging, characters, quick preparation. But just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, Maggi revealed an even more devious side. Every scandal followed the same pattern. An outcry, a statement from Nestlé, PR campaigns meant to restore trust. And shortly after, the shelves were full again. Consumers started buying again. The pattern is obvious. Maggi is so deeply ingrained in our daily lives that even massive scandals can't displace it. But while we focus on lead, salt, and palm oil, something even more dangerous is happening in the background. Maggi doesn't just change our health. It also changes our culture, our relationship with food, our society, economic power, and politics. In Brussels, Berlin, or Paris, Nestlé is among the most active food lobbyists. When it comes to stricter regulations, the company regularly advocates for more relaxed requirements. Products like Maggi, bouillon cubes, and instant soups also benefit from such decisions because stricter limits would directly impact business. In some countries, Maggi has become so important that a boycott or ban would be almost unthinkable. One example, the lead scandal. Although the outcry was enormous, Maggi returned within a few months because millions of retailers, factories, and jobs depend on the brand. Politics was under pressure and Maggi was back on the shelves. While we're talking about bouillon cubes and noodles, in reality, we're dealing with billion-dollar markets. Maggi is one of the highest-grossing brands in the Nestlé Group worldwide, with annual revenues of over 1 billion Swiss francs. These revenues not only secure gigantic advertising budgets, but also strengthen Nestlé's influence on nutrition issues and food policy. The bitter truth, where corporations and politics merge, there is hardly any protection left for consumers. Because who dares to take action against a company that provides jobs, pays taxes, and supposedly offers solutions to hunger? The uncomfortable truth, Maggi shows us how easily we can be manipulated. We let ourselves be convinced by advertising and ignore what lies behind it. Maggi is not solely to blame. It is part of a larger system, a food system that operates cheaply, quickly, and industrially. A system that we all support whenever we reach for it. Maggi started as a help for the poor and ended up as a billion-dollar business. What once promised hope now stands for deception, manipulation, and conditioning. And yet, the decision is ours to make. Every purchase, every grab for a cube, every packet bought is a vote. A vote for whether we continue to let ourselves be deceived or whether we take responsibility back into our own kitchens.